Breaking news is in as we have trade updates around Vooch and Zach LaVine. We're going to be talking about what NBA insiders are saying about both of these players. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today we are looking at the most recent trade rumblings around Vooch and Zach LaVine. Remember with Vooch, he has been linked to the Golden State Warriors, so we're going to be talking about what Marc Stein had to say about the update around him. And then also too with Zach LaVine, the most recent trade update that we had been hearing about Zach LaVine is he had been listed as a player that could possibly be moved in that potential deal that would send Jimmy Buttler over to the Phoenix Suns. And so we're going to be looking at what Brian Windhorst had to say about that. And so let's go ahead and jump into this first trade update around Vooch and what Marc Stein is saying about that situation. And so this is NBA Central here, where you can go out there and you can find this particular tweet. Obviously, it links to Marc Stein and the Stein line, where he writes about all the rumblings going on here around the NBA. But just talking about the Chicago Bulls, how they are linked to Vooch. And so paraphrasing this here, just talking about how the Golden State Warriors are, at the front of the line when it comes to looking at Vooch. However, it looks like that the Golden State Warriors are only willing to go ahead and throw out some second round draft capital at this point in time. We've been hearing that the Chicago Bulls are going to be maybe interested in first round draft capital for him. And so let's start there with that. And so I think with the Chicago Bulls, I totally understand this and I get it. I think that it is important for the Chicago Bulls not to really sell low on their players. I've said this before. I don't feel like that they should attach any kind of draft capital to move players, and also to think that they should get the true value for their players. And especially in this situation, I think that with the Golden State Warriors, this is something that absolutely fits their team. I think that they could definitely use a stretch big, and I've talked about just the plus that they would probably get with that. And I think that even with Vooch being a flawed player on the defensive end, I really do feel like the Golden State Warriors system could probably make up for that. And so, I think the bottom line here is that the Chicago Bulls probably should continue to stay patient here. Maybe something does materialize to where they do get some first round draft capital for Vooch. Maybe there's another team at the last second that does want to jump in there. We did talk a little bit briefly about the Los Angeles Lakers. Maybe they're a team that jumps in and says, you know what, we'll give you the first round pick or whatever, because we feel like that Vooch is enough. And so that's the thing here. I think it's just going to be a matter of patience for the Chicago Bulls. And then if we're just looking strictly at the Golden State Warriors, and maybe people are saying, why aren't they doing this? Because yes, they do need this player. I think it just really goes into really the message that they've been sending all along, is that they are not wanting to leverage their future, just for maybe this season or two. And I totally understand that. I totally understand the front office thinking more long term. And so that's something that I can certainly appreciate. I wish we saw that here with the Chicago Bulls, but I think that is it, because, with Steph Curry, as great as he is, he's currently, I think, dealing with a knee injury. And he's also, if you got a chance to watch that last game, he's dealing with something with his hand. He had a hand wrap. And so, it's just, if they burn through the draft capital to get Vooch, is that going to be enough for them? Personally, just looking at Golden State, I think that they want to make another couple transactions. I think that they would want to get a player like Vooch and maybe make another move going into this next season to try to maximize that window. And so I think that that's maybe why they're playing maybe a little bit more of a waiting game to see, is this really what they want to do before they go ahead and really give up this draft capital, because they most certainly do have the expiring contracts that the Chicago Bulls want. I definitely agree with that. And they do have some young players that I think the Chicago Bulls would be interested in, at least one of those players that could, I think, fit with the long-term vision of this team. I've said that. It's just going to be a matter of how the Chicago Bulls really play that. And so hopefully patience is going to be really the answer as we sit back and wait as the trade deadline moves a little bit closer here. And so now let's go ahead and shift focus, and now let's look at the most recent rumblings around Zach LaVine. And so, look, we've been hearing that Jimmy Buttler perhaps reportedly wants to go to the Phoenix Suns. And then we had heard something wild come up here that maybe potentially five teams involved in a trade that would help get Jimmy Buttler over to the Phoenix Suns. And the Chicago Bulls, I guess, were reportedly emerging or had been thrown in there as a team that could be a facilitator here. And so this comes from Brian Windhorst. And you can find this particular piece that I went and looked at on Arizona Sports. I think that it's a terrific article because as soon as you go into it, it actually has the podcast that he was on. It's the Hoops Collective. He's on there with Tim Bontemps and then also, too, I believe, Tim McMahon. And we've talked about this before, but it's a roundtable discussion here to put this into full context. And there is a portion that talks strictly on the Chicago Bulls. So if you go to this article, you'll get the excerpts and you'll also get a chance to watch the actual podcast, which is an hour and 4 minutes, but it'll take you right to that part. And so going into what Brian Windhorst had to say, and I thought it was funny because he was like, look, I don't want to necessarily go in on this topic because, I've been linked to being an aggregator here. And so I appreciate that from Brian Windhorst, but him just saying that, hey, at the bottom line is this, I just want to throw this out there that the honest thing here is that these teams have had some discussions. And he's saying, I'm not saying that this is going to happen or, hey, they're in like these major talks, but he's just saying like, there has been some discussions there. And so just paraphrasing that, you can see it for yourself. And so with that being said, we knew that, the discussions were out there where it would possibly send Beal to the Bulls, Butler to the Suns. I think, the Bucks would be involved in this and Chris Middleton going over to the Heat or something like that. And so, yes, we knew it was out there. So to hear that confirmation, I guess we hear that, those trade rumblings were there. But also, I think what is more interesting is when Tim Bontemps and then Tim McMahon start to weigh in a bit more. And Tim Bontemps, look, he says that I think that outright that this would be a crazy trade for the Chicago Bulls and really highlighting the fact that if the Chicago Bulls were to go out there and make this deal, you are getting a player that has that player control in Bradley Beal. I mean, that is a contract that is just not going to be movable because even if you come up with another package to move him, he ultimately has the control and he can veto that. And he was like, look, any other deal out there, and I'm even going to throw it out there, like even if because somebody mentioned it too in the comments, like Embiid, I'm like, Embiid, that's still a contract that you can move him in the sense that you have the control there. He can't veto a trade. Like Bradley Beal can absolutely veto that trade. So even if you have plans that can really open it up for your roster, he can stop those things. And so I think for that reason, for one, I've been saying it doesn't make sense for the Chicago Bulls to get involved. And then also too, when you think about this, they do talk about Zach LaVine and they talk about, at the end of the day, Zach LaVine is playing very well. He is actually playing closer to what his contract is, valued at. They do mention that. And I think that they're right on with that because they mentioned the fact that he's shooting 51, 44, 79. I've talked about, how elite that is if you get into the 50, 40, 90 club. And I think what's probably most interesting about the stat is that he's struggling from the free throw line. But still, nevertheless, he's shooting 44%, which is up 9-10%, I think, from last season. And so he's shooting a career high as far as the three-point shooting is concerned. I know his scoring is right around 24, which is, I think, down a little bit from like 27 or something like that he's had in the past. But still, the way he's doing it and the usage rate and everything else, like I think that I've loved the way that he's doing this. And so for the Chicago Bulls to just ship him off for a player that has complete player control, I think that they would be doing themselves a disservice. And one of the things that they talk about is for, this draft capital that the Phoenix Suns have. When you think about it, these draft picks that they have, it's the worst picks out of all those picks that they have just traded for from the Utah Jazz. And so, you're looking at a draft pick that's going to be 25 or later, in the first round or whatever that looks like. And you have to ask yourself, in this point, and I just thought about it, I think I would want more quality over quantity in this situation, because I would much rather have, just the quality and not have to worry about just the headache that comes with Bradley Beal here. Because look, Bradley Beal is 31. He has 3 years left, 52.1, 53 million. 57 million with a player option and no trade clause. Where you have Zach LaVine, he's at 43 now, he's at 45 next season, and he's at 48 on that player option. And I'm betting more on Zach LaVine and him continuing to play at this level. I think as long as he stays healthy, he will do so. And because of that, I think that I could get the value necessary for Zach LaVine without taking on a bad contract. Even though I know that that's part of the business in the NBA, I think the Chicago Bulls can definitely wait here, and I don't think that that necessarily slows down your timeline as far as really rebuilding this team out and setting it up, for the long-term future. So even if you move on from Vooch and some other players, I think that Zach LaVine is a player that he's just not going to be in the way of that. You can always move him and revisit that down the line, and you might actually get what you are looking for if they're looking for first-round picks or whatever the case may be. And finally, before we jump out of here, one of the things that they talked about in this is just the situation with, the Miami Heat. And like the Miami Heat are in a situation where they're probably going to get the best assets out of the deal, I think, as far as the draft capital is concerned, because they're giving off the player that is most wanted in the deal, which is Jimmy Buttler. And also, you got to think about it like this. With Pat Riley, with their, front office, they are an elite front office. Like, I think that they're going to go into the negotiation table, and I think that they certainly are going to win this deal. So that is something to really think about if you're getting into this deal to be a facilitator. The Miami Heat are probably going to get the best out of this deal. And so, anyhow, let me know in the comments what you think about the fact that Brian Windhorst has really confirmed that just essentially there have been some discussions here, and also to what Brian Bontemps is saying, that this would be pretty ridiculous for the Chicago Bulls to visit. Once again, I think that you should definitely go ahead and click the link and listen to what they had to say in the entirety. And then also too, with what Marc Stein is saying, that the Golden State Warriors are just reluctant right now to come off of first round draft capital. Do you think the Chicago Bulls are right by staying pat and just waiting for those first round picks to come, or should they go ahead, make the move now? They also have maybe an off season where they could maybe try to revisit this with both players. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, what you're thinking here. And so before we jump out of here, I just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the content. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest as we try to reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NBA season out there. And so, as we always say, look, I think that there is no NBA trade out there for the Chicago Bulls that is going to, go ahead and make them an immediate contender. I don't think that that is going to happen. I think that this is all about picking a direction and now moving players to where you can get the necessary draft capital. I think you're lucky if you can get a younger player over that can help you as far as your long-term build. I think that that is an added plus. But the bottom line is that the Chicago Bulls have got to do a course correct here, and these trades are going to help you get the necessary draft capital, move off of players and salaries, and get you into the right direction to do so, and really get you to a point now where you take maybe 2 or 3 steps back in order to take 5, 6 steps forward. And for me, winning is not just going ahead and qualifying for the Eastern Conference playoffs every year. I'm looking at getting this team, or hopefully getting this team, back to being a title contender again, like I've seen this team win a title before. So hopefully I get a chance to witness that again. But I know, there's going to be several moves that have to be made. And like I always say, that this franchise has got to get a direction. So let me know in the comments. And always, I'm saying, go Bulls, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.